This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. It's Smackdown time. By popular request, Dell XPS 13 versus the new Samsung Notebook 9. It's the teeny bezel-less design versus the 1.9 pounder. Both of these with Core i5's 1080p non-touch displays. We'll talk about those because those are the most comparable configurations. And modern Skylake inside. Both very desirable, both pretty similarly priced. The Dell's a little bit more expensive by around $100 to match the configuration of the Samsung. Which should you buy? We're going to find out now. All right, so two premium 13.3-inch Ultrabooks. How do you choose, especially when they're fairly close in price? Now, the Dell XPS 13 can get pretty expensive. We'll talk about that later. But in a comparable configuration to the Samsung Notebook 9, there's only $100 sets them apart, with the Dell being $100 more expensive. And they have two different design takes here. Now, the Dell goes for being the most compact in terms of dimensions this way and this way of any 13.3-inch Ultrabook. It's about the size of a 12.5-inch laptop. Not that there are many of those on the market. It's pretty light, sure, at 2.7 to 2.9 pounds, but Samsung goes for something different. They're not trying to reduce this dimension, but they are trying to make the thinnest and lightest 13.3-inch laptop you can buy. It's 1.9 pounds, actually just a little bit under. And it's super duper skinny. It's under and half an inch thick. Now from the front, they're both pretty much the same thickness, but the Dell gets thicker at the back and is thicker than the Samsung. So it depends on what's more important to you, having the lightest possible laptop or having one that is more compact in these dimensions. Now, neither of them is heavy, but this Dell is miraculously almost a pound heavier, since we happen to have the touchscreen version here, which is the heavier of the two. The 1080p non-touch is 2.7 pounds. The touchscreen is 2.9 pounds. Now, once we open them up, they have the same display size. It might not seem like it because the Dell's so compact and it has an even tinier bezel, which a lot of people like the look of. The negative for that is that it has a chin cam. The webcam is right down there because there's no room up top. The bezel's too skinny. The Samsung has a traditionally placed webcam. The Dell is available with sharp IGZO displays, whether you get the 1080p or the higher resolution QHD Plus display. The Samsung has one of their better PLS panels, which is like IPS pretty much. And you can see here it's actually the brighter and the more vibrant looking display. IGZO displays tend to be kind of cool, and that can mute the warmer tones, particularly reducing the apparent vibrance, even though they both do similarly with full sRGB coverage and around 75–76% of Adobe RGB if you're talking about the 1080p non-touch model on the Dell. Let's talk about touch too. The Samsung is available only with a non-touch display. It is a glossy display, but it is very anti-reflective. It's really pretty impressive what they've done there. With the Dell, if you want to be at the same price point as the Samsung, around that $999 to $1,100 for the Dell, you're going to get a 1080p, 1920 by 1080 matte non-touch display. If you want to spend more money, several $100s more, you can move up to the QHD Plus touchscreen, which is glossy, and that happens to be the one that we have right here. So if you want touch, keep that in mind, and that's also going to raise the price of the Dell, and it's not even an option on the Samsung. These thin and light, super thin and light laptops like the LG Gram, the Samsung Notebook 9, and the upcoming HP Spectre are all non-touch because non-touch screens are thinner and lighter. So much as I adore the look of that almost no bezel display, I'd pick the one personally that has the more vivid but accurate colors, and that would be the Samsung. But I do a lot of serious photo editing, for example, for the photos for our website where we have our written reviews, and that makes a difference to me. For you, if you're just a content consumer, you probably care a little bit less about that. Certainly the Dell panel is still a very nice panel. Now, both of these are low travel backlit keyboards. With the Notebook 9, by the way, it's also available in a 15-inch size, and that one doesn't have backlighting on the keyboard. Odd, really odd that. Anyway, that's something to consider in case you just like this but you want the bigger version. Anyway, low travel keyboards here around 1.3 millimeter, but the Samsung actually, I like it a little better. They just got the keys just right in terms of damping and feel, and I've used it to write a few reviews, and you know my written reviews are long if you visit our site. And it's good. And I also like that blue-green backlighting that's easier on the eyes and doesn't derange the person sitting next to you on the couch at night who's trying to watch a movie without the glare of your backlit keyboard. Dell keyboard isn't bad. It's just a little bit more abrupt, a little bit more it feels a little bit more bare bones in terms of that comfy typing experience. Trackpads on both of these are quite good. They're both Microsoft Precision trackpads, and really, it's a wash there. They're both very good trackpads. If you look at the interior finish here, I like the Dell XPS carbon fiber thing. Hey, I'm a car geek. I can't help it. This feels nice. It's a soft touch finish. The Samsung is a very clean, almost Mac-like, straight silver presentation of a laptop. It is clean. It is modern. It looks pretty and all that sort of thing, but this is an interesting thing that Dell does with the black interiors. The drawback here is that this does pick up fingerprints. It's not so hard to clean the Dell. If it does, a little soft soap and a damp towel paper will do the job, but I know some of you are tidy types out there, and that really does bother you. The Samsung really doesn't show fingerprints. Now, for those of you who like to compute flat on your back, obviously the Samsung is the one that goes flat. This is as far back as the Dell reclines. I find that certainly an adequate amount of recline on the Dell. I don't tend to use my laptops flat. I know some people who give presentations to other people like the flat position, and those of you who use them in bed propped up against your knees like flat. So it's just in case it matters to you, there it is. When it comes to ports, Dell pulls ahead with the forward-looking USB-C 3.1/Thunderbolt 3 port, which right now is kind of a headache trying to find adapters, and sometimes even Dell's own firmware updates temporarily disable their own dongle adapters and all that sort of thing. But it's one of those things, eventually they'll all get it right and it'll be fine, and we'll love having it. But for right now, it's just a challenge, but still something to keep in mind. Samsung has no USB-C port whatsoever on the 13-inch model. They do on the 15-inch model, however. Now we've got USB standard ports on both of these. You can see we've got a USB 3.0 port here, type A, and over there as well. Headphone jack is on here. This one has a headphone jack also. Now something else on the Samsung, it's a little bit more present day looking. It comes with an Ethernet adapter, gigabit Ethernet adapter in the box that plugs into one of their little specialized dongles. It has micro HDMI. You probably have one of those cables sitting around from smartphone days maybe, or if you're a previous Samsung Series 9 owner, because they used to use that. Now on the other side, each of these has another USB 3.0 port. The SD card slot you can see on the Dell. The Samsung also has a full-size SD card slot. It's under a little flappy door on the side of the computer. You just can't see it from this view. So when it comes to ports, basically, there's also an optional VGA, mini VGA adapter available for the Samsung. When it comes to ports, the Samsung is a little more practical in the here and now. You do have a display out port, an HDMI, for example, whereas with the Dell, you're going to have to get into the USB-C or Thunderbolt 3 adapters to do that. A couple of years from now, the Dell will probably be the more solid, more useful machine, but in today's world right now, the Samsung is a little bit more easy to work with. Now, when it comes to horsepower and performance, these are in pretty close to a dead heat. That is, unless they're not. I'll explain that. The Samsung Notebook 9 is currently available in one and only one configuration, Intel Core i5 Skylake, 8 gigs of RAM soldered on board, and a 256 gig SSD. It's an M2 SSD. It's using the SATA 3 interface. The Dell is also available in that configuration. Their $999 configuration has 8 gigs of RAM and a 128 gig SSD. You have to spend another $100. You can go up to $1,100 if you want that 256 gig SSD. It is, however, a PCIe SSD, and that's a faster SSD interface. Will you notice this in everyday use? Not so much, but everybody's very specs conscious, and I'm sure sooner or later all laptops will move up to PCIe, which currently costs a bit more. Now at the Dell, well, I say they're the same unless they're not. That's because Dell, as ever, always makes a wide variety of configurations available. If you really want to go bare bones, you can go down to a Core i3, 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gig SSD for $799. If you want to go to town, you want to get a Core i7. They even now, besides just having the dual Core i7, have the one with Intel Iris graphics, a little extra oomph there. You can go ahead and spend like up to $1649 if you want to get the Intel Iris model with the Core i7 and the touch screen. So there's more options, more variability. If you're looking at this as your main machine and you have a certain spec in mind, obviously you'll have more choices with the Dell. It may cost you a pretty penny, but you got more choices there. And now you can see that SD card slot door there that was hidden before on the Samsung. On the bottom, both of these have removable bottom covers. With the Dell, it's going to be Torx T5 screws. With the Samsung, it is Phillips head screws. If you take those off, you can service the battery if you want. You could swap out your SSD. RAM is soldered on board, not upgradable for either of these. The wireless card on the Dell is socketed. It's a Broadcom card that's pretty good. And the Intel 8260 Wi-Fi card is actually integrated into the motherboard on the Samsung. When it comes to battery life, you might think that the Dell would seriously trounce a super skinny laptop, but Samsung's worked some magic here, and even though it does have a smaller capacity battery, the Dell is designed to accommodate a wide variety of processors that might consume more power after all. And the Samsung is about a 7.5 hour laptop, which is pretty darn amazing for something that makes the Dell feel like a boat anchor in terms of weight. But still, if you get the 1080p XPS 13, that one is a real Energizer bunny, and that's more like an 8.5 to 9 hour laptop. If you go up to that QHD Plus touchscreen, though, the Dell drops down to around 6.5 hours, so it depends on the configuration there. But when comparing like configurations in terms of display, the Dell will outlast the Samsung, but neither of them is weak, but the XPS 13 is pretty darn long-lasting. Now, speakers on these, Samsung usually has really good sounding speakers on their laptops, but again, that's another casualty of the thin, lightweight. Speaker grills you can see right over here. It's pretty thin sounding, not super duper loud either. The drivers are just pretty small. The XPS sounds more loud and full. The XPS honestly does not have awesome speakers either, but it is a bit more full sounding. Headphone jack audio on both of these is very good. So there you have it, the Samsung Notebook 9 versus the Dell XPS 13. Either way, you're getting a stunning machine. I'd say there's more brand awareness probably around the Dell. They make a lot of laptops. Everybody knows about them. Samsung, you know, they almost stopped making laptops in the US, and then they came back again. So this is a new kid on the block. But still, like I said, either way, you're getting a really nice machine. For me, the 1.9 pound factor wins out over the skinnier bezels. Skinnier bezels are pretty, but you know, when you're toting something around, you start to appreciate the lower weight. But be sure to watch our video reviews of each of these products, read our written reviews, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos.